The voting chamber erupted in triumphant roars that shook the crystalline walls. Delegates from 63 species raised their appendages, tentacles, and limbs in unified celebration. The holographic display showed Earth's dying sun, its corona flickering with the unmistakable signs of imminent collapse. Within 72 hours, the star would consume the inner planets, including the homeworld of humanity. Admiral Renth stood at the central podium, his scaled face arranged in what his species considered a victory expression. The Kavari had waited generations for this moment. Humanity had been a persistent irritation since their first clumsy attempts at interstellar travel 2 centuries ago. They asked too many questions, refused to accept their place in the established hierarchy, and worst of all, they bred at an alarming rate that threatened resource allocation across multiple sectors. Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, Renth announced, his translator converting clicks and whistles into standard coalition language. Our monitoring stations confirm complete radio silence from the Sol system, no distress beacons, no evacuation requests. The humans have gone dark. A delegate from the Porathi Collective, a species resembling oversized mantises, chirped with barely contained glee. Perhaps they've already descended into chaos. Their primitive emotional responses would lead to panic, surely. Our psychologists predicted mass hysteria within the first week of detection, added the Virin ambassador, her 3 eyes blinking in sequence. Humans lack the mental discipline for coordinated crisis response. They likely tore themselves apart before the sun could finish the job. Renth activated another display showing the quarantine barrier his fleets had established around the Sol system. 12 destroyer groups formed an impenetrable perimeter. As a precautionary measure, all trade routes have been redirected. No ship enters or leaves the system. We wouldn't want some desperate human vessel spreading panic or, worse, requesting asylum. The chamber filled with approving gestures. The Council's economic minister, a slug-like being named Porthos, oozed forward to address the assembly. I've prepared projections for resource reallocation. Earth's former trading partners can redirect agricultural imports to more deserving species. The asteroid mining operations in their outer system contain enough rare minerals to fund expansion projects for a decade. Before proper salvage can begin, we must ensure complete sterilization, interrupted the Kavari security chief. Human vessels, even civilian ones, possess surprising destructive capacity when cornered. We should wait until the sun finishes the work, then send survey teams to catalog remains. Renth nodded agreement. The humans had proven frustratingly resilient in past conflicts. Their military tactics showed disturbing creativity, adapting to situations faster than any modeling program predicted. But creativity meant nothing against stellar physics. No amount of human stubbornness could negotiate with a dying star. Motion to formalize quarantine protocols, Renth declared. All in favor of maintaining the barrier until confirmed extinction. Every delegate signaled approval. The holographic record would show unanimous consent, a rarity in council proceedings. Usually at least one species objected on principle, but not today. Humanity had no allies present, no sympathetic voices to question the decision. The Yalith observer, relegated to the chamber's upper gallery with other non-voting species, watched the celebration with dimming luminescence. Her crystalline body refracted the chamber's lights into mournful patterns. She remembered when her own world faced catastrophe, how the council had debated response options for weeks while her people suffered. Eventually, they'd voted for strategic non-intervention, which meant abandoning billions to their fate while salvage companies cataloged valuable resources. She tried to warn a human diplomat once, during a rare moment of informal contact at a neutral station. The council fears competence more than incompetence, she'd said. They forgive failure but punish potential. The human, a woman named Walsh working as medical personnel, had simply smiled. Then we'll have to be very careful about what potential we show them. The memory flickered through the Yalith's consciousness as she watched the council's celebration reach new heights of enthusiasm. Servers brought out fermentation products from a dozen worlds. Delegates who normally avoided each other's presence shared toasts to humanity's demise. The relief was palpable. No more questions about council policies. No more human vessels showing up in disputed territories offering assistance that made other species look incompetent by comparison. No more uncomfortable reminders that newer species could sometimes innovate faster than ancient ones. Renth raised a ceremonial cup filled with Kavari victory wine. To a safer galaxy, to the preservation of proper order, to the end of human interference in affairs beyond their understanding. The chamber echoed with approval. Across the assembly, beings who normally competed for resources and influence found rare common ground in their shared satisfaction. Earth's sun would soon erase a problem that military force and diplomatic pressure had failed to solve. Nature itself would enforce what the Council desired. The holographic display continued its countdown. 71 hours, 43 minutes until stellar collapse reached the point of no return. The Council adjourned to continue celebrations in less formal settings. Renth remained behind, studying the data streams from his monitoring stations. Something nagged at his tactical instincts. The silence felt wrong. Humans were noisy by nature, always broadcasting, always communicating. Their media networks generated more signal traffic than some entire civilizations. Yet for 6 months nothing. Complete communications blackout. His security training suggested caution, but the stellar physics were undeniable. Whatever the humans might be planning, they couldn't escape simple mathematics. Their fastest ships needed weeks to reach safe distance, and they'd shown no signs of mass evacuation. Renth dismissed his concerns as paranoia and joined his fellow officers for victory drinks. Behind him, the holographic sun continued its death spiral, counting down to humanity's extinction. 6 months earlier, the emergency session had convened in a converted warehouse outside Geneva. No grand government buildings, no ceremonial halls. Dr. Lin Zhao stood before a hastily assembled audience of engineers, military commanders, and civilian administrators. The projection behind her showed their sun's irregular patterns in unforgiving detail. Confirmation came through at 0400 hours, she said, her voice steady despite 3 days without sleep. The instability is irreversible. We have approximately 6 months before the inner system becomes uninhabitable. The room remained silent. No gasps, no panic. Everyone present had been briefed individually over the past week. This gathering served a different purpose than shock absorption. Project Exodus activates immediately, announced General Williams, a gray-haired veteran who'd spent 40 years preparing for scenarios exactly like this. All personnel have been pre-assigned. Station chiefs, you'll find your deployment orders in the secured files. We start conversion operations within the hour. Anna Walsh sat in the medical section, her tablet displaying assignment details. She'd be joining Hangar Complex 17, providing medical support for the 20,000 workers who'd be retrofitting commercial vessels for deep space capability. Around her, other doctors and nurses read their orders with similar calm focus. "Seems almost anticlimactic," whispered the surgeon beside her, a man named Roberts. "No grand speeches about humanity's survival." Anna shook her head. "Speeches come later, right now we work." Across the warehouse, engineer Davy Santos reviewed schematics for cargo hauler modifications. His team would transform vessels designed for 6-month asteroid mining runs into ships capable of years-long voyages. The mathematics were brutal. Every cubic meter mattered. Every gram of weight required justification. "We're gutting life support redundancies," his supervisor explained, highlighting sections on the display. "Single-point failures become acceptable risks. We're optimizing for capacity, not comfort." Davy understood the implications. They were building ships that might kill their passengers through equipment failure, but definitely would if they couldn't carry enough people. The choice was simple mathematics. Outside the warehouse, the world continued its normal rhythms. Markets opened for trading. Children attended schools. Entertainment networks broadcast their regular programming, a carefully orchestrated illusion of normalcy that served multiple purposes. If the population panicked, productivity would collapse. If the galaxy detected preparation activity, they might interfere or demand tribute for assistance. The silence was deliberate strategy. Hangar Complex 17 occupied a former aircraft manufacturing facility in the American Midwest. Davy arrived on a commercial transport filled with workers carrying standard industrial equipment. To external observers, just another factory shift change. Inside, the transformation was total. 3 massive cargo vessels occupied the hangar floor, their hulls already stripped to skeletal frames. Work crews swarmed over them in coordinated patterns that would have impressed any military operation. Welding arcs cast dancing shadows across the ceiling. Heavy machinery moved structural components with millimeter precision. Anna established her medical station in a climate-controlled corner. Within an hour, she treated her first injuries: a welder with burns from equipment malfunction, a structural worker who'd miscalculated a load bearing, a systems technician suffering exhaustion after a 16-hour shift. "You need to rest," Anna told the technician, a young woman barely out of university. "Can't. The power distribution network needs recalibration before we can test the new reactor configurations." The technician accepted a stimulant shot, signed the medical waiver, and returned to work. This pattern repeated across hundreds of facilities worldwide. Shipyards worked triple shifts. Factories retooled to produce specific components. Supply chains reorganized with ruthless efficiency. Every commercial spacecraft manufacturer became part of the effort. Every military vessel underwent conversion. Even the luxury cruise ships orbiting Mars found themselves drafted into service. Davy's specialty involved environmental systems. He'd spent 15 years designing closed-loop life support for deep space mining operations. Now he applied that expertise to ships that would house families, children, elderly populations. The calculations kept him awake at night. Oxygen recycling rates, water purification capacity, waste processing efficiency. Each variable represented human lives. "We're 20% over theoretical capacity on Vessel 17, he reported during a coordination meeting. "If we maintain current loading, we're looking at system failure within 8 months of departure." His supervisor, a woman named Patterson, studied the numbers. "Can we increase efficiency?" "Not without breakthrough technology we don't have. We're already pushing physical limits." "Then we accept the risk. 8 months gets us beyond the solar collapse and into the rift territories. We'll have time to establish infrastructure for permanent habitats before systems fail." The logic was merciless but sound. Better to risk failure in deep space than guarantee death in the solar system. Anna watched the workers with growing admiration. No heroic speeches, no dramatic gestures, just humans doing what they'd always done best, solving impossible problems through relentless effort. A mechanic jerry-rigged a repair using components from 3 different systems. A logistics coordinator rerouted supply deliveries through 12 intermediary stations to avoid detection patterns. A structural team worked through the night to reinforce hull plating that would face radiation levels no ship had been designed to handle. The world above remained oblivious. News networks discussed political scandals and entertainment gossip. Sports leagues continued their seasons. Financial markets fluctuated based on quarterly reports. Beneath it all, 10 billion people prepared to leave the only home humanity had ever known. "Do you think we'll make it?" Roberts asked Anna during a rare break, both of them staring at the ships taking shape. Anna thought about the question. about the mathematics that said they were attempting the impossible, about the workers who refused to accept those limitations, about a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars through sheer stubborn determination. "We don't have a choice," she said simply, "so yes, we'll make it." The sensor anomaly appeared first on monitoring station Kavari 7, a automated platform drifting at the edge of the quarantine zone. Lieutenant Shen, a junior technician manning the overnight shift, almost dismissed it as instrument malfunction. The readings made no sense. Massive gravitational distortions emerging from the lunar far side, where nothing existed except abandoned human research outposts. She ran diagnostics 3 times before escalating to her supervisor. Within minutes, the alert chain reached Admiral Renth's command vessel. Within an hour, every Council ship in the sector had repositioned for optimal sensor coverage. The holographic display in Renth's strategy room showed space itself warping. Not the random fluctuations of natural phenomena, but organized patterns that suggested coordinated power generation on an incomprehensible scale. "Impossible," breathed the VRIN tactical officer. "Those energy signatures would require reactors the size of small moons. The humans don't have that kind of infrastructure." "Didn't have," corrected Renth, his scaled skin rippling with unease. Past tense seems appropriate. The first vessel emerged like a whale breaching dark water. 10 kilometers of reinforced hull plating, studded with sensor arrays and communication towers. It aligned itself along a precise trajectory, then held position with drives that barely registered on thermal scanners. Efficient, quiet, professional. Then came the second vessel, and the third, and the 100th. They emerged in waves, each group moving to predetermined coordinates with mathematical precision. No wasted energy, no confused maneuvering, no signs of panic or disorder. The human fleet assembled itself in a formation that would have impressed any military academy instructor. "Count," Renth demanded. "Still emerging, Admiral. Current estimate exceeds 3,000 vessels of various classifications. No, 4,000, 5,000. The tactical officer's voice climbed with each update. "Sir, they're not stopping." The display zoomed to show details. Massive colony arcs that dwarfed anything in the Council's civilian fleet. Military vessels that looked like they'd been built for war, then converted for evacuation but retained their weapons capability. Medium transports, small shuttles, even what appeared to be repurposed mining equipment. Everything that could carry humans and cross interstellar distances now powered up in synchronized sequence. A Porathi observer stationed on a nearby Council vessel transmitted frantic updates. "Life sign readings indicate full capacity loading. These ships aren't partially filled, they're packed to maximum safe density, possibly beyond safe density." Renth's claws dug into the command console. "Where did they get the resources? We monitored their industrial output. There wasn't enough construction material in their entire system to build a fleet this size." "Unless they'd been building it for years," suggested his intelligence chief, a Kavari female named Sirth. "Disguising construction as normal industrial activity, spreading production across hundreds of facilities to avoid detection." The implications chilled Renth's blood. The humans had known about the solar instability long before sharing information with the Council. They'd prepared in secret, maintaining perfect operational security across their entire species. No leaks, no defectors, no signals intelligence suggesting the scale of their effort. More disturbing was the silence they'd maintained. No distress calls meant no begging for help. No evacuation requests meant no diplomatic dependency. The humans had looked at their dying sun and decided they'd solve the problem themselves rather than trust the galaxy's mercy. "They're accelerating," reported the tactical officer. "All vessels entering formation cruise velocity, plotting trajectories. Admiral, they're heading for the Rift territories." Renth's secondary eyes widened in disbelief. That's madness. The rift is uninhabitable. Spatial anomalies, resource scarcity, navigation hazards that kill experienced crews. Perhaps they don't know, offered Cirth. Humans lack our historical databases. They might genuinely believe they can survive there. But Renth wasn't so sure. He'd fought humans in 3 border skirmishes. They didn't make stupid mistakes. If they chose the rift, they had reasons. The lead vessel broadcast on standard diplomatic frequencies. A human face appeared on the display, a woman with dark skin and gray-streaked hair. Her expression held no fear, no desperation, just calm determination. This is Commander Rachel Okonkwo of the Human Evacuation Fleet. We're departing the Sol system under our own power. Our trajectory takes us through neutral territories under Galactic Maritime Law Article 7, which guarantees passage rights for refugee populations. We request no assistance, expect no interference, and will defend ourselves if necessary. Okonkwo out. The transmission ended before anyone could respond. The human fleet continued its acceleration, already reaching velocities that suggested their engineers had made advances in drive technology without reporting them to council oversight committees. Should we intercept? Asked Cirth. They're technically violating quarantine protocols. Renth studied the fleet's formation. Over 8,000 vessels now, moving in perfect synchronization, each one presumably filled with desperate humans who'd watched their world die. Desperate but organized, desperate but armed, desperate but clearly prepared to fight if challenged. Negative, he said finally. Let them go. The rift will kill them more efficiently than our weapons, and we avoid the political complications of firing on refugees. But even as he gave the order, doubt gnawed at his tactical instincts. The humans had surprised them once with this fleet. What other surprises had they prepared? On the human flagship, Commander Okonkwo watched the council vessels maintain their distance. She'd gambled that they wouldn't attack, calculating that the council preferred convenient solutions to complicated ones. A species dying in the rift was cleaner than a species dying under council weapons fire. Davy Santos worked at an engineering station nearby, monitoring the fleet's power distribution. All vessels reporting green status, no failures in the departure sequence. Anna Walsh reviewed medical reports from across the fleet. Injuries from the hasty boarding, some panic attacks, several cases of medication shortages that would need addressing, but no catastrophic failures, no ships left behind. They'd gotten everyone out. 10 billion humans, packed into 8,000 ships, now fleeing toward the most dangerous region of known space. The galaxy expected them to die quietly in the rift's hazards. Commander Okonkwo smiled grimly. The galaxy had underestimated humanity before. She intended to prove them wrong again. The fleet accelerated into the darkness, leaving behind their dying sun and the Council's assumptions. Earth fell, but humanity had just begun to rise. The rift territories stretched across 17 light-years of space that made experienced navigators nervous. Gravitational eddies appeared without warning, pulling ships off course into collapsing stellar remnants. Nebulas thick with metallic particles blocked sensors and corroded hull plating. Asteroid fields drifted through sudden wormhole formations, making navigation charts obsolete within hours. The Council had attempted colonization 3 times across 2 centuries. Each attempt ended in disaster. The Viren lost an entire expedition to a spatial fold that appeared in stable space. The Kavari established a mining outpost that vanished overnight when local gravity inverted. The general consensus classified the rift as too dangerous for the resources it offered. Commander Okonkwo stood in the observation deck of the flagship, studying the roiling nebulas ahead. Behind her, the fleet maintained formation despite conditions that should have scattered them like leaves in a storm. Navigation reports significant drift in Sector 7, announced her operations officer. 3 vessels pushed off course by gravitational shear. Have them recalculate using the probability matrices, Okonkwo replied calmly. The patterns aren't random, just complex. Chen's team found the correlation between stellar wind density and wormhole formation. We can predict where the hazards will appear. The operations officer looked skeptical but relayed the instructions. Within minutes, the 3 vessels corrected their trajectories using calculations that shouldn't have worked. Except they did, because human mathematicians had spent the 6-month journey analyzing the rift's chaos and finding hidden order. Davy Santos worked 3 decks below, managing the environmental crisis that everyone had known was coming. The ship's life support systems were failing exactly on schedule. Water recyclers operated at 40% efficiency. Oxygen scrubbers couldn't handle the population density. Carbon dioxide levels crept higher each day. We need to reduce passenger count or increase system capacity, his assistant said, reviewing the grim numbers. Current trajectory puts us at critical failure in 6 weeks. Then we don't stay on the ships for 6 weeks, Davy replied, pulling up survey data of nearby planetoids. We find somewhere to put people while we repair and upgrade the systems. The closest option was a rock-designated Rift 77 Baker by the Council's old charts. Atmosphere marginal. Gravity 60% of Earth standard. Surface temperature fluctuations that would kill most species. The Council had surveyed it briefly before determining it worthless for colonization. Davy studied the data with different eyes. Marginal atmosphere meant something to work with, not automatic failure. Low gravity reduced structural requirements for habitats. Temperature fluctuations just meant good insulation design. The Council saw obstacles. He saw engineering challenges with solutions. Prepare landing teams, he told his assistant. We're going to need surface facilities operational within 2 weeks. Anna Walsh joined the first landing party, her medical kit packed for conditions no human had experienced before. The transport bucked through atmospheric entry that felt like being inside a shaken box. The planet's magnetic field fluctuations made instrument readings unreliable. They landed using visual navigation and pilot instinct. The surface looked like something from a nightmare. Jagged rock formations thrust upward at impossible angles. The sky flickered between purple and green as radiation from nearby stellar remnants interacted with the thin atmosphere. Wind screamed across exposed plains, carrying dust that abraded everything it touched. "Well," said Roberts, the surgeon who'd accompanied her, "at least it's not boring." The engineering teams went to work immediately. They identified cave systems that could be pressurized for habitation, deployed solar collectors that could handle the radiation levels, established water extraction from subsurface ice deposits that shouldn't have existed but did. Within a week, the first habitats came online. Crude, uncomfortable, but functional. More ships landed, disgorging passengers who'd spent months in cramped vessels. Children ran across alien soil for the first time, their laughter echoing in the thin air. Elderly couples stood together watching sunsets in colors Earth had never produced. The sick and injured received treatment in medical tents that Anna's teams set up with ruthless efficiency. Other vessels pushed deeper into the rift, surveying resources the Council had dismissed as inaccessible. A mining team found platinum deposits in asteroid fields that shifted position daily. They developed tracking algorithms that predicted movement patterns, turning chaos into opportunity. A science vessel discovered bacteria living in nebula clouds, organisms that processed metallic particles into pure elements through biological processes. Instant refinery capability that required no heavy industry. The human fleet spread through the rift like water finding cracks. Every hazard became an opportunity. Navigation difficulties. Humans developed intuitive piloting techniques that worked when instruments failed. Resource scarcity. Humans found materials in places other species never looked. Environmental hostility. Humans built habitats that shouldn't function but did through creative engineering. Okonkwo watched reports flow in from across the rift. Every settlement reported challenges but also progress. The mathematics still looked grim. They had years of work before achieving true stability, but they were alive, active, and adapting. Then the first refugees arrived. The Yalith scout ship appeared at the edge of human sensor range, broadcasting distress signals in 17 languages. Its crystalline hull showed damage from weapons fire. Okonkwo ordered an intercept course despite her officers' concerns about unknown contacts. The Yalith captain explained through a translator that barely functioned. Her people had been driven from their mining claims by Kavari expansion forces. 60,000 refugees now drifted in inadequate vessels, running out of supplies and options. The council had classified them as acceptable losses. "We heard rumors," the Yalith captain said, her crystalline structure refracting light in patterns that suggested hope. "Rumors that humans were settling the rift, that you welcomed those the council forgot." Okonkwo looked at Davy and Anna, seeing the same answer in both their faces. "We have habitat space on Rift 77 Baker," Davy reported. "It's not comfortable, but it's available. Medical facilities can handle their biology with some adaptation," Anna added. "We've been studying xenophysiology during the journey. We can make it work." Okonkwo turned back to the Yalith captain. "Bring your people. We'll find room." The Yalith settlement grew on the northern plateau of Rift 77 Baker, where the crystalline beings could absorb specific radiation wavelengths their biology required. Anna spent weeks learning their physiology from scratch, discovering that their internal structures responded to light frequencies, the way human nerves responded to electrical impulses. "Your medical knowledge saved my daughter," a Yalith elder told Anna, her body glowing with gratitude patterns. "The council doctors refused to treat her. They said the resources were better spent on citizens." Anna calibrated the light therapy device she'd improvised from mining equipment. "She's 8 years old. Of course we treat her." The concept seemed to baffle the Yalith. In council space, resources flowed to those with political value. A refugee child had no value, but humans operated on different economics. Children were always treated, regardless of their parents' status. Word spread through communication channels the council didn't monitor. The humans in the rift offered sanctuary to those with nowhere else to go. Within months, other species began arriving. The Torvin came next, aquatic people whose homeworld had been seized by corporate mining interests. They needed water environments to survive, which should have been impossible on the arid planetoids. Davy's engineers solved it by repurposing the water recycling systems from damaged ships, creating sealed habitats where Torvin could live submerged. "You're wasting resources on us," the Torvin administrator said, confusion evident in the translator's interpretation. "We have nothing to offer in return." Davy adjusted the habitat's salinity levels to match Torvin biochemistry. "Your people, that's enough." The Prin arrived in farming vessels, insected beings fleeing agricultural lands the council had redistributed to more politically connected species. They possessed expertise in hydroponics and soil engineering that human farmers had never encountered. Within weeks of arrival, the Prin had tripled food production across human settlements using techniques that seemed like magic. "You share the food equally?" a Prin hive mother asked Anna, watching human children and Prin juveniles eating together in a communal hall. "Even with those who don't contribute to production." "Everyone eats," Anna confirmed. "Children, elderly, injured workers, everyone." The hive mother's antennae quivered with what the translator interpreted as profound confusion. "This is not sustainable economics." "Maybe not by council standards," Anna agreed, "but we're not the council." The settlements evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. Humans provided infrastructure and medical care. Yalith offered expertise in energy collection and crystalline computing. Torvin taught advanced aquaculture techniques. Prin revolutionized food production. Each species contributed what they could, received what they needed. Conflicts arose, of course. Cultural misunderstandings that required patient mediation, resource allocation disputes, disagreements about settlement planning, but they solved problems through discussion rather than hierarchy. No species held authority over others. Decisions required consensus. Roberts worked alongside a Yalith surgeon, learning to treat injuries using light-based healing that human medicine had never conceived. "Your people's biology is fascinating," he told his colleague. "The way you channel energy through crystalline matrices." "Your people's compassion is fascinating," the Yalith replied. "The way you help those who cannot reciprocate, the Council would call this weakness." The Council isn't here. More refugees arrived. The Kelth, silicon-based beings who processed rock for nutrients. The Vroth, small mammalian creatures fleeing persecution for their size. The Shen, cloud dwellers who existed in gaseous states and needed specific atmospheric conditions. Each group arrived expecting the same treatment they'd received from the Council: exploitation, dismissal, or at best indifference. Instead, they found humans who asked questions. How do you live? What do you need? What can we learn from each other? Davi's engineering teams grew to include 17 species. They developed hybrid technologies that combined human adaptability with alien specialization. A Kelth engineer showed them how to process asteroid material without heavy machinery. A Vroth technician taught them miniaturization techniques for sensors. A Shen atmospheric specialist helped design air filtration that worked for multiple biochemistries simultaneously. The settlements expanded beyond survival into community. Cultural exchange became common. Human children learned Yalith mathematics. Prin juveniles studied human literature. Torvin artists created underwater sculptures that humans could only appreciate through virtual displays. The Rift territories transformed from exile into home. Okonkwo watched it all from her command center, tracking population growth and resource distribution. The numbers still looked precarious. They lived on margins that would horrify any council economist. One major system failure could cascade into catastrophe. But she also saw resilience. When a solar flare damaged the eastern settlements, 17 species worked together on repairs. When food production declined during a planetary winter, the Prin developed cold-resistant crops in cooperation with human botanists. When a plague organism from a nebula infected 3 species simultaneously, Anna's medical teams collaborated with alien healers to develop cross-species treatments. "We're building something unprecedented," she told her senior staff during a strategic review. "Not human civilization, not council structure, something new." "The council won't ignore this forever," warned her intelligence chief. "We're creating an alternative power structure in their backyard." Okonkwo nodded. "I know, which means we need to be ready when they notice." She pulled up long-range sensor data showing Kavari vessels patrolling the rift's outer boundaries, observing, assessing, calculating whether the refugees and humans posed a threat worth addressing. The answer would come soon enough. But for now, in the forgotten corners of the rift territories, humans and refugees built communities based on principles the Council had long abandoned. They helped because it was right. They shared because everyone deserved dignity. They protected the vulnerable because strength meant nothing without compassion. The galaxy had cheered Earth's fall, but in the rift something new was rising. The Kavari invasion fleet entered the rift territories with the confidence of a species that had conquered 17 systems across 4 centuries. Admiral Renth commanded from his flagship, surrounded by tactical displays showing 300 warships in perfect formation. The operation had been approved by the Council after 2 years of observing the human settlements. The refugees and their human protectors had grown too organized, too prosperous. They threatened the established order, by proving alternatives existed. Initial scans show settlements on 47 planetoids, reported the tactical officer. Population estimates suggest 2 million beings across multiple species. Defensive capabilities appear minimal, mostly converted civilian vessels. Renth studied the data with satisfaction. The humans had spent their resources on habitats and infrastructure rather than military buildup. Typical short-sighted thinking. They'd made the rift livable but left themselves vulnerable to anyone with proper warships. "Begin the operation," he ordered. "Secure the primary settlements, disable their vessels, and prepare occupation protocols." The Cavalry fleet advanced in standard formation, the same tactics that had succeeded across dozens of campaigns. But within the first hour, problems emerged. The lead destroyer group entered a nebula region that scans had shown as clear space. Suddenly, they were blind, sensors overwhelmed by metallic particles that shouldn't have been there. Navigation became guesswork. 3 ships collided attempting to maintain formation. 2 more drifted into gravity wells that appeared without warning. "How did humans navigate this?" demanded Renth. "They've been operating here for 2 years with civilian vessels." No one had an answer. The humans hadn't navigated around the hazards. They'd learned to read them, predict them, use them. Knowledge the Cavalry didn't possess. The second destroyer group approached a human settlement on a planetoid designated Rift 12 Charlie. As they entered orbit, defensive platforms activated. Not military-grade weapons, but mining lasers repurposed for combat. Cargo drones converted into missile platforms. Agricultural satellites suddenly broadcasting jamming signals that disrupted Cavalry targeting systems. "They're using civilian equipment," the weapons officer reported with disbelief. "Nothing here should be capable of military resistance." But it was, because humans had spent 2 years learning the Rift's resources, understanding what could be adapted, improvised, transformed. The Council saw civilian infrastructure. Humans saw potential weapons systems waiting for activation. Admiral Renth's flagship approached the main human colony on Rift 77 Baker, expecting to overawe the defenders with superior firepower. Instead, his navigation officer screamed a warning as local gravity suddenly inverted. The flagship lurched sideways, narrowly avoiding a collision with its escort vessels. "Gravitational anomaly," the science officer reported frantically. "It appeared in stable space. No warning, right in our approach vector." Except it wasn't random. In the Human Operations Center, Davy Santos and a Yalith physicist monitored gravitational sensors they deployed throughout the rift. They'd spent 18 months mapping the anomalies, learning to predict when and where they'd appear. Now they used that knowledge to place hazards directly in the Cavalry fleet's path. "Next inversion in Sector 9, the Yalith reported. "Timing in 43 seconds. "Redirect the beacon," Davy ordered. "Make it look like a navigation aid." The Cavalry took the bait, adjusting course toward what appeared to be a safe corridor. Instead, they flew directly into a spatial fold that scattered their formation across 3 light minutes. On the medical frigate, Anna Walsh prepared for casualties. Not Cavalry casualties, but human and refugee defenders who'd engaged the enemy at close range. A Torvan pilot brought her ship alongside a Cavalry destroyer, using aquatic reflexes to maneuver through weapons fire that should have been impossible to dodge. She disabled the destroyer's engines with precision strikes before retreating into a nebula. "How did she survive that?" Anna asked Roberts, watching the tactical feed. "Practice," Roberts replied. 2 years of flying through the rift's hazards. The Cavalry trained in simulators. Our people trained in hell." The battle continued for 16 hours. Not a conventional engagement with battle lines and fleet maneuvers, but guerrilla warfare in 3 dimensions. Human vessels appeared from nebulas, struck targets, and vanished before the Cavalry could respond. Refugee ships used unconventional tactics their species had developed during desperate flights from Council persecution. The Prin deployed clouds of organic chaff that disabled Kavari sensors. The Shen infiltrated enemy vessels through ventilation systems, sabotaging critical equipment. Admiral Renth watched his tactical display with growing horror. He'd brought 300 warships to crush a refugee settlement. Instead, he was losing vessels to civilian freighters piloted by beings who shouldn't have survived this long in the rift's hazards. His flagship shuddered as mining drones impacted the hull, not enough to penetrate armor, but enough to damage sensor arrays and communications equipment. He was being blinded, deafened, isolated from his fleet. "Withdraw to Rally Point Delta," he ordered. But half his ships never received the transmission, their communications disrupted by techniques the Kavari hadn't encountered before. Commander Okonkwo watched from her command center as the Kavari fleet retreated in disorder. She could have pursued, inflicted more damage, but that wasn't the goal. "Open channels," she ordered. "All frequencies, including Council diplomatic bands." Her face appeared on displays across the rift and beyond, transmitted on wavelengths that would reach every Council vessel within 50 light-years. "This is Commander Rachel Okonkwo," she began, her voice calm and clear. 2 years ago, the Galactic Council celebrated humanity's extinction. They watched our sun die and called it justice. They quarantined our system and prepared to salvage our resources. She paused, letting the words sink in across the galaxy. "We survived, not because the Council helped us, but because we helped ourselves. We came to the Rift territories that the Council declared uninhabitable. We made homes where you said life was impossible. We thrived where you expected us to die." Behind her, the tactical display showed Kavari vessels fleeing in chaos. "We found refugees here, species the Council had abandoned. People you decided weren't worth saving. We gave them shelter, medicine, food, not because they could repay us, not because it benefited us strategically, but because it was right." Davy and Anna stood nearby, watching their commander address the galaxy. "Admiral Renth brought 300 warships to conquer settlements you thought were defenseless. He discovered that people fighting for their homes, protecting their families, defending their communities, are never truly defenseless. We know this terrain. We've mastered these hazards. We've built something here worth defending." She leaned forward, her expression hardening. "The Council can choose war against a coalition of species that have nowhere left to retreat. You can fight people who have already lost everything except each other. Or you can accept that the galaxy has changed, that humanity survived your celebration of our death, that the refugees you abandoned have found new family." The transmission ended. Across Council space, delegates watched in stunned silence. The humans hadn't just survived. They'd created an alternative to Council authority, a community based on mutual aid rather than hierarchical power. In the Rift territories, the settlements continued their work. Children played in parks that shouldn't exist. Farmers tended crops in soil that had been lifeless rock. Doctors treated patients from 17 species using hybrid medical techniques. Engineers designed improvements to infrastructure that grew more sophisticated each month. Admiral Renth's battered fleet limped back toward Council space. He would file reports, recommend strategies, argue for renewed attempts at conquest. But he knew the truth in his secondary heart. The humans and refugees had won more than a battle. They'd won the right to exist on their own terms. Earth had fallen. The Council had cheered. But from the ashes of humanity's homeworld, something new had emerged. Not human civilization alone, but a coalition of the forgotten and abandoned. They'd taken the galaxy's cast-offs and built communities. They'd transformed exile into home. The Rift territories no longer belonged to chaos and hazard. They belonged to those brave enough to thrive where others saw only death. And across the galaxy, other refugees heard the message. Other abandoned species learned that alternatives existed. The Council's grip on power had weakened, not through military defeat, but through the simple demonstration that their way wasn't the only way. Commander Okonkwo stood at the observation window, watching ships move between settlements. Human vessels alongside Yalith crystalline craft, Torvan water carriers beside Prin agricultural transports, a fleet not of conquest but of community. Earth fell, but humanity and those who joined them had risen stronger.